Oh, we're live. I'm live. Calix Boxing 2.0 here on Calix Boxing. And what I'm telling you, the subs are going well. The archive viewers are going well. I appreciate everybody that's been tuning in live. My guy Chauncey Pearls is in the building. And I'm telling you, Calix, I got AJ. And I'm telling you, Chauncey, you're being trapped. You're being trapped. I'm telling you, they're trapping you. Usyk's going to win the fight. And we'll talk more about this in a minute. I'll be joined by D-Style Boxing in about 10 minutes. And we'll be talking a lot about Usyk versus AJ, the rematch. And on top of that, historically, what happens in immediate rematches when it comes to heavyweight boxing. Because we look at trends when we go into fights. We look at trends historically. We look at trends when it comes to fighters. So we're going to look at AJ as a fighter. We're going to look at Usyk as a fighter, and we're going to match these guys up. We've got something to go off of in the first fight. We're gonna talk about track records in rematches between these two fighters, and then we're going to go historically and look at what happens in immediate rematches in heavyweight title fights, because there's a track record of it. There are, by my count, 11 occasions where a heavyweight champion lost his heavyweight championship and then immediately rematched the guy who beat him. We'll be talking about the record, the trends of that. Who does it favor? Does it favor the guy who lost the belt in the rematch? Does it favor the guy who won the belt going into the rematch? Does it favor the guy stylistically who is more versatile? Does it favor the puncher? We'll be talking about all that leading up to AJ versus Usyk 2. And what a fight it is. And we'll be talking about the betting odds as well when D-Style Boxing comes on here in about 6-7 minutes. But I see 9 people already in. Hit that like button as y'all come in. If there's one thing you do, hit the like button. If you're not sub, but also hit the alerts, because YouTube is YouTube. And just because you sub to somebody now doesn't mean you're going to see their videos. So you got to sub and hit the alerts. YouTube makes you do the extra work now in order to see the people that you actually sub to. That's what your YouTube is at this point. But make sure to hit that like button as y'all come in. And if you're watching an archive, as most of you will, hit that like button below and leave a comment, because I read all of them and get back to all of them. And on Twitter, popping off on Twitter. Oh, the Tank Davis video went viral on Twitter. If you're on Calix Boxing 2, if you're on Twitter, go to Calix Boxing 2 at Calix Boxing 2, and you'll see the Tank Davis video up there, and it went viral. They did not like, and a lot of people liked it, but that 5 to 10% of Tank super fans did not take that well. They did not take it well. They do not like when you take shots at their sacred cow. And I love taking shots at sacred cows, but they don't like it. They don't like it. I pointed out the Tank Davis theorem. The Tank Davis theorem is this. Tank Davis loses a fight. The guy who loses, Tank Davis wins a fight. The guy who loses the fight to him gets more popular, gets more notoriety than ever. They're the greatest. It's the greatest loss ever. And on top of that, even though these guys outperform the odds when it comes to fighting Tank Davis, he still mythically wins every fight, going away easily. Devin Haney, he wins that fight. According to them, Devin Haney, he wins that fight. Kambosos wins that fight. Lomachenko wins that fight. Shakur Stevenson wins that fight. Keith Thurman in a meeting of catchweight, he wins that fight. Henry Armstrong historically wins that fight. Manny Pacquiao wins that fight. Aaron Pryor wins that fight. He wins them all. He wins them all. So we've gone over that. Some news today, by the way. The WBA has mandated that Leo Santa Cruz fight Lee Wood next, and he has 24 hours to decide if he's going to defend against Lee Wood or if he's going to vacate his WBA belt and go over there to fight Ray Vargas for the WBC strap. And why this is important is because we pointed out over the past couple months that Leo Santa Cruz hasn't defended his belt in 3.5 years. Hasn't defended in 3.5 years. Moved up to 135, 130. Fought his last fight at 130, but he's sitting there at 126 with the championship belt he hasn't defended in 3.5 years. So finally, and I'm hearing the WBA was pressured into doing this, but finally they're mandating him to fight and defend his strap against Lee Wood. So we're going to see what Leo Santa Cruz does here. We're going to see where Leo Santa Cruz's head is. Does he want to defend at 126? Does he want to go for the bigger fight? So you think anyway, the WBC against Ray Vargas. I'd like to see the Lee Wood fight, and I'd like to see Ray Vargas defend against Brandon Figueroa. I think those are two great fights. Let them defend against those two guys, and then let's have a unification of the WBA and WBC after those fights. That's what I would love to see. But I'm sure somebody's going to tell me how that's not realistic some kind of way. So Leo Santa Cruz has to defend that strap. It's been 3.5 years. Defend that strap. Also in the news from the WBA is the WBA is mandating that after Gennady Golovkin fights Canelo Alvarez, he has 120 days to defend his middleweight strap against Lara. If he doesn't, then he has to vacate his WBA middleweight belt after that if he wants to stay at 168. So it's good to see WBA finally getting things going and saying, hey, guys, champions, you got to defend your belts. Come on, defend your belts. If not, let's strip you. And the middleweight division is a dumpster juice division. Let's see what Chauncey Pearl's got. Why do I think Ryan versus Tio is a more exciting fight than Ryan? Tank Tio versus Ryan is a great fight. It is. It is. You can't go wrong either way. Let's see him. Let's see him. If Usyk is still standing at the end of the 8th and is still in good shape, I think AJ is toast. And there you go. And we'll be talking about that as well. AJ's plan coming into the fight will obviously be, let's go straight after Usyk. It's going to be let's go straight after Usyk. And I got D-Style Boxing here. What's going on, D-Style?
Chilling like a villain. You know what I mean? Just here. Just doing what I do.
And I was just talking about AJ versus Usyk, just getting into it. And to me, the style for AJ in this fight, he said, what did he say? When he came to America after the fight, he said, I'm shopping for a trainer who is going to bring the dog out of me. He's going to bring the dog out of me. That's who I want. That's what I want to fight next. So to me, this is more of a mindset fight. It's more of a guy who's going to bring it out of him. Tell him to go straight at Usyk, and this is going to be a more aggressive AJ going into Usyk. Is that the read you get going into this fight?
Yes. I do think he's going to try, keyword try, to be more aggressive against Usyk. I think everyone is kind of half right. So when people say things like, oh, why is he like trying to box against Usyk? I mean, that's dumb. Be aggressive with him, right? Well, he doesn't fight aggressive like that. He doesn't manhandle a guy. That's not his style. It doesn't mean he can't implement some of that, right? He still needs to box a little bit. He still needs to kind of, get in the pocket with him as much as possible. But what he does need to do is find a way to rough up Usyk just enough, though. He's not going to transform himself into this like brawler or something. He just doesn't. You know what I mean? To use his size. It isn't going to happen. He still needs to fight like AJ, but a modified version of himself, where he's more aggressive and takes a little more chances. Because if he doesn't take chances, he's not going to win. Now, with that said, if he does take chances, Usyk might win. And it could go two ways. Either he wins, it pays off, or he loses in worse fashion. But he has to do it.
Haven't we seen that type of AJ in the past? An AJ who can be aggressive, an AJ who can go after knockouts, a guy who can do it in an intelligent way as well. So he can measure his way in and then go for the kill. Haven't we seen that AJ in the past before? He's going on a run where not so much, but haven't we seen that in the past with him? More in the Klitschko days?
Of course. He used to fight more aggressive for sure. But that kind of went away when he got hurt by Andy Ruiz, and everything changed after that, quite frankly. Like it just did.
Yeah, so when we talk about this fight coming in, obviously we have a track record of these guys have been in the ring with each other. We know who Joshua is at this point. We know who Usyk is at this point. And I think when we talk about Joshua, I think we have it pegged that he's going to come in more aggressive here. Robert Garcia style, more offensive minded. all that good stuff. So that'll likely lead to more openings for Usyk, but can Joshua get Usyk out of there before those
Right.
openings present themselves? That's going to be the question. But the odds right here, we're talking about betting lines. Usyk is a minus 200 favorite. Joshua is a plus 170. So they're giving Joshua a decent percentage of winning this fight.
You have to.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would say it's somewhere between 70-30, something like that. Not quite toss-up territory, but they're giving Joshua a decent percentage of chance of winning this fight. And I think the reason they're doing that is if you look at historically and we look at trends, we don't just have a track record of Joshua and Usyk here fighting each other. We also have a track record of historically there have been heavyweight champions lose and then get immediate rematches with fighters. It's happened 11 times to my count. 11 times. You know what the record is of fighters who lose the heavyweight championship and then go into the rematch? Their record is 4-5-2 in
Sounds
immediate
about right.
rematches. So it's basically about even. I mean, it's about even. There's not much to go off of. So I think Vegas, the odds makers, they don't really know what to go off of here. It's kind of shaky because we have a track record of Joshua in rematches, right? Joshua did much better in the Andy Ruiz rematch than he did in the original fight. So he made adjustments. He made proper adjustments. And of course, we didn't see the Ruiz we saw in the first fight, but he made adjustments. He won the fight. But there's a track record of Joshua in rematches, but the track record historically of heavyweight champions losing their belt and then trying to regain them in the rematch, it's somewhat up in the air, right? It's almost 50-50 whether they get their belt back or not.
It is, and in some cases, it was like the complete opposite. You know what I mean? Like this just complete opposite type of fight or result. I mean, Rockman knocks out Lewis. Lewis comes back, knocks him out cold. Like, just a complete opposite of what we saw. Some of those draws, I'm trying to, I guess, remember which ones those were. Was that like Holyfield Ruiz or something? Or?
The draw was Holyfield Ruiz 3, which they fought 3 times, and they split it down the middle, 1-1 and a draw.
Damn.
And then you have, let's first talk about the wins. Joshua versus Ruiz. Joshua loses the belts. He comes back and defeats Ruiz. Lennox Lewis, you just said it, against Hakeem Rockman. Loses, comes back and knocks him out. Michael Spinks defeated Larry Holmes in the rematch. Holyfield beat Tyson in the rematch, although those are both wins, right? Those are both wins. But some of the losses are Patterson took the title back from Johansson in the rematch in 1960. That was the first immediate rematch. So that's one case there. But some of the losses are Patterson lost a rematch to Sonny Liston. Liston lost a rematch to Cassius Clay after losing the initial fight to him. Yeah. So it's pretty much up in the air as to how these fights play out. But one thing I've noticed is the common denominator here is it seems to me the more versatile fighter seems to be winning these rematches. The more versatile fighter. So you say in this fight, who's the more versatile fighter? Is it Joshua or is it Usyk? To me, it's Usyk. I think he can present more challenges than Joshua. Do you agree with that? Do you think Usyk's the more versatile fighter than Joshua?
Oh, look, I knew that going into the first fight. You know what I mean? But I think what people are leaving out, and I think what the odds makers are, I believe, looking at why they say, you know what, we can't make him that big of an underdog is a couple factors. Number one, it is the heavyweight division. And I know people get tired of hearing that, but it's true, right? The higher you go in division, these guys are hitting harder. The knockout ratios are just higher. Like, it's just the way it is. So that's number one. And then on top of it being a heavyweight division, Joshua's a puncher in his division. You could crack. So you just kind of at that. But that aside, because that's kind of a factor in most fights, but is if you look at the actual fight, look, it is true that Usyk put on a great boxing display. Some of the rounds were competitive for the most part, though, but I mean, there was rounds where Usyk clearly dominated, and he dominated him in the last and final round where, I mean, Josh was basically saved by the bell, kind of an assist there at the end. But what I'm looking at is Usyk's face, brother. Look at that cut. A couple more punches right there. That cut can get really, really bad. And they were caused by punches. So that wasn't a headbutt. And guess what happens if you can't continue with a cut? That you know what I mean? So that there's a pathway there. And it was a pretty ugly cut, to be honest with you. It wasn't like some little cut or something. It was like if you look at that Usyk cut, everyone go back and watch that. Josh was like in hindsight was a little closer in getting a stoppage win than we think he was. He just, and a credit to Usyk, I mean, and his corner. Shout out to Russ Amner, great cut man. They kept it under control, and Usyk obviously did a good job, kind of, protecting it for the most part. But there's a pathway, in my opinion, right there.
When's the last time we saw a cruiserweight really come up and be a great heavyweight? It would be Holyfield, right?
I mean, we've seen I don't know if you want to call Hay great. He had a little run.
I would consider him okay. Cunningham okay. You have some guys who are okay, but the last great one I could think of is Evander Holyfield. Right. And he's also been in immediate rematches, right? We just talked about his trilogy with Ruiz, and he had some success. He had some downfalls, but the other one was Holyfield-Tyson, right? Holyfield, he wins both of those fights, and he looked better in the second fight, which is why Mike Tyson was likely just biting his ear off. But is there something to? Are we just writing Joshua off?
I'm not.
Because
we got to stop using that word "we" a little too loosely. I'm not counting him out at all.
I mean, the boxing world, I would say,
okay,
because Joshua is still naturally the much bigger man.
Most definitely, people are counting him out. There's no doubt. But I go back. Cuts, generally speaking, open up easier, right? Like, I don't want to make too much of this cut, but like, it has to be said. Like, a couple more jabs there, a big right hand, boom. Hey, we're gonna stop it, right? It's Saudi Arabia is basically AJ's second home. If he starts roughing up Usyk and really makes it a point, because there's no, look, man, if I'm noticing that, you don't think Robert Garcia noticed that?
Mm-hmm.
Then Robert's on his ear like, yo, if you got more aggressive with this dude, we're willing to take a few more shots, just keep hitting that fucking cut, man, you would have stopped this guy. Like, it's there. You know what I mean? And there's always scar tissue. So if it opens up early, he's going to win this fight.
And this is another thing right here is, are we also jumping to conclusions calling Usyk the more versatile fighter at heavyweight? Because there's a difference between
he's the most versatile fighter, brother.
More versatile, or just because I know he's a great jab, high output. He's got all that stuff, and he's got decent punching power, even at heavyweight. He's got punching power that can at least.
I gotta go by the fight.
Slip jab. He was able to double, triple up the jab. So yeah, but at the same time, Joshua is able. He showed in the Ruiz fight, and I know Ruiz is no Usyk. I get it, but he showed that he can change strategy a little bit. He has versatility. Like this says, a former Olympic gold medalist, unified heavyweight champion. He's not a slouch. The guy has boxing ability. He has the ability to work off the jab. He's got the ability to step on the front foot and work with the power, fight on the inside as well, be a little cagey if he has to. So he's not a slouch that a versatile fighter is going to be able to take advantage of. So I just think there are adjustments that Joshua can make that can make this an interesting fight. I just tend to think that Joshua is going to jump on Usyk early and see what happens, see what sticks to the wall.
I don't disagree with anything you said. Just because I think Usyk's a better boxer doesn't mean I think Joshua sucks. Joshua's an excellent boxer, right? But he definitely, where he could make up that difference is his size and power. Like you know what I mean? That's where he can make up that difference. Joshua is a very talented boxer. This guy was doing pull counters against Pulev, and like you 6'6" guys don't just do pull counters. You know what I mean? But he was doing that. But can he do that against like Usyk? Probably not. But he just needs to do enough to stay in the pocket with him. You know what I mean? Just enough. But then he needs to find a way to use his size. Like that's what he needs to do in a smart, strategic way. I'm not saying change his whole style or nothing like that. Be smart and strategic, and he could do it. It's possible, but I'm still favoring Usyk, but I'm not counting Joshua out at all.
Right. And another strategy that can be used here is Joshua just leaning on Wilder, going straight Vladimir Klitschko and just using his size against Usyk. I just think he's going to struggle a little bit with that as well, because you got to catch him. You got to catch him coming in. So Usyk's going to find his range. He's going to find that mid range, and he's going to go to work on Joshua. And I think we're going to get more of the same. Yes, Joshua will be aggressive earlier, but once he does not knock out Usyk early in the fight, those holes are going to be there for Usyk to take advantage of. And once he does, once he starts hitting Joshua, he turns. Once the fighter gets hit, he reverts back to who he was. And that's what we're going to see here. I don't think there's enough time for him to mesh with Robert Garcia in order for there to be a strategic change, in order for him to take advantage of Usyk and whatever flaws Usyk has. You're talking about a guy who has consolidated 7 of the 8 major belts in the 2 weight classes he's performed in less than 20 fights. When we talk about these Ukrainian guys, Usyk and Lomachenko, they got their work done early. Like Lomachenko became a 3-division champion in how many fights? Pretty quick. Usyk became a 2-division champion in how many fights?
They got on the fast track for sure.
They've gone on a fast track, and it has a lot to do with the amateur background as well. They've been doing this their whole lives, so they have more experience than their fights tell you. So I bring that up to say these are versatile fighters. They're versatile fighters. Like, it would not shock me at all if Lomachenko were in rematches with a Salido, with a Teofimo Lopez, that he would perform better. I don't know if he beats Teofimo Lopez in a rematch, but he would perform better. He would not perform in the first 7 rounds of the second fight the way he did in the first fight. These guys will make adjustments. So I think Usyk's going to be prepared for whatever Joshua has.
Yeah, I just don't like how people talk about the fight like as if Usyk went unscathed or something. Like, it's just not true. I mean, I just want to share something, if I may, just to kind of show people that Usyk didn't necessarily just leave this fight unscathed. Look at that cut. Look at the position of that cut, right? And look at both eyes, by the way. You know what I mean? And look at the bridge of his nose. Like, Joshua was putting hands on him, which is impressive for Usyk. You could also say, wow, look, he proved he could take a heavyweight punch for sure. But look at that cut, though. If that cut opens up a little earlier in that position where it'll be dripping on the eye, they stop the fight and Joshua wins by TKO.
You know what that shows me right there is there's not much room for error when you're making a jump from cruiserweight to heavyweight and fighting big punchers. Because as you've said in the past, if Deontay Wilder wasn't in the division, Joshua would be seen as the puncher in the division. He'd be the biggest puncher at the elite level in the division.
100%.
So you're talking about Usyk moving up from cruiserweight to heavyweight, being the big puncher in the division. I mean, fighting the big puncher in the division. And to go 12 rounds with those guys, even if you're winning 9 rounds, your face is going to look like that. That's how little your margin for error is. And that's how special what he's doing. Even in a historically weak heavyweight division, it's still special to move up and win 3 of the 4 major belts and possibly fight Tyson Fury next to a 6'8", 6'9", and you're moving up from cruiserweight. It's special. But look at what you've got to go through. Even winning 9 rounds, look at what you got to go through to get those 3 belts.
Yeah,
right?
Well,
Look at what you got to go through.
Yeah, he took damage and he proved, look, I could take punches from Anthony Joshua. No doubt. This is not all negative for Usyk. My concern, if there's any for Usyk, is that cut. And if Joshua could open that cut again, right, could he win by some type of crazy stoppage or something? You know what I mean? Is it possible? Doctor may look at it and be like, nah, and we might have a trilogy in our hands.
Y'all make sure to hit that like button as y'all come in. If you do one thing, hit that like button and let us know in the comment section, because this is what's intriguing to me.
You know, we're getting a trilogy if AJ wins, right?
If AJ wins, we likely get a trilogy, but and this is sort of what I was going to ask.
We're not going to get
what happens if Joshua wins against Usyk? Do we get the trilogy, or do we get them trying to bring Fury to the table? Because there's no rematch clause for Usyk in this fight, to my knowledge. The
I
way
think they go
AJ had the
trilogy.
rematch. So
I
do
think
they
do
try to
trilogy.
bring Anthony Joshua back? Tyson Fury to the table for the big fight? Because Tyson Fury versus AJ would be the big fight for all
I hope
marks.
so, but like I said, I believe we get the trilogy if AJ wins, in my opinion.
Do you think not coming to US for training with Garcia is a huge red flag? Do you think that's a red flag? Because I don't.
Well, kind of is. Well, where's Garcia at?
Garcia's over there.
I mean, I don't know what to make of that. I know that's good for Garcia. He's already lost fighters. He's not giving them attention to detail. So
He's making a lot
it
of
might be a
money.
bigger issue for Garcia than AJ, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
But I really hope Garcia's fighters understand what a big opportunity this is for Garcia and that gym and all that. You know what I mean? It's a big opportunity. If AJ wins this fight, the whole world's going to know that Robert Garcia helped him out. And what that's going to do for that gym would be wonders. You know what I mean? So.
And I'll ask this question again. I sort of asked it last week, and I'll ask it to the chat as well. What do you think the odds of Alexander Usyk being the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world by the end of 2023 are?
I'm going to say like 20%.
And why would you put it at 20%? Would
Here's
it
why I
be
put
due to boxing
20%.
politics?
Well, here's why. One,
Okay.
he needs to beat Josh from the rematch. That's number one. That's already an obstacle. Two, we already know that there's boxing politics. He could lose a belt. He doesn't want to pay a sanction. That's always a factor. We need to actually make the fight happen with Fury. Right? It actually needs to happen, and they all need to keep those belts, right? And then he needs to beat Tyson Fury, even if he gets the fight. And all that together, 20% might be high, but I'm going to say 20%.
Okay, so let's do this. He beats Anthony Joshua. Then they move mountains and Usyk versus Tyson Fury happens. Where do you place Usyk's odds of beating Tyson Fury?
I give Usyk about a 45% chance to beat Tyson Fury.
Ooh, that's good. 45%.
I think there's
Why so high?
something there. I think there's something to do with fighting the smaller heavyweights. And Usyk is not just a smaller heavyweight. Usyk is actually filling out. He's 225. He's the most skilled heavyweight, cruiserweight since Evander Holyfield. And I think Fury, he just acts different about this guy. He just does. It's not me doing it. It's Fury doing it. Fury just acts a little different when they say the name Usyk. Kind of like the hyenas with Mufasa. You know what I mean? They say Usyk. Fury starts talking about how the heavyweight championship is a Western belt, not an Eastern belt. He starts talking about money. There's no money on the table. He starts talking about his life, okay, and his health and his family. He starts saying all those are red flags to me. Once a fighter's asked about another fighter and they start talking about their health, their liberty, wanting to spend time with their family, that and they could do it indirectly, but they do it because that's immediate, no, I've done so much for the sport of boxing. I want to spend time with my family. You know what I mean? There's only certain fighters that make them start talking that way, right? For whatever reason, that's what happens with Fury when someone says the name Usyk.
It could also be Fury being a head case, and it could also be him using leverage. But I tend to agree with you. I think there's something with a smaller fighter who is versatile, who can box and maneuver and use lateral movement. I think that bothers Tyson Fury that guy is out there. There's a reason he's calling him a bloated up middleweight, right? He's calling him a bloated up middleweight.
You called him, and this is another another kind of sign of that you're kind of worried about him. You start accusing them of using steroids.
Yeah.
You know, that's a red flag to me. You know what I mean? Once you start talking about he's a PED user, even though the only one that's ever been caught doing any of that shit is Fury himself. So, I don't know why he's throwing around accusations, and I know Klitschko actually called him out for that. But, when he says, he's just a little man, he's a middleweight on steroids, blah, 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 blah. Okay, cool. So fight him.
You know what I would put those odds at? I would put it at 50% for Fury, 45% for Usyk, 5% draw. That's what I would put it. I would give Fury the slight edge just because it's hard to envision.
Draw's possible.
Fury. Yeah. And I understand that Usyk hasn't lost either. I get it, but it's tough to envision a 6'8", 6'9" heavyweight who has shown he can chameleon himself into whoever he needs to be, right? Now we're talking about a versatile fighter. So we're talking about two versatile fighters, one who is much bigger naturally. We're talking about a guy who showed that he can beat Deontay Wilder by fighting Deontay Wilder's style. He's shown that he can outbox boxers. He's shown that he can he watched film on his last fight and saw that the uppercut is what's going to go to work there, and he won with the uppercut. He's shown that he can use these things, right? He can morph into whoever he needs to be. So now we have a versatile fighter who is big fighting a smaller versatile fighter. So that's why I give the slight edge to Fury.
I think that the problem that Fury's going to have is that he don't have to worry about just one. Like with White, no offense to White, he just had to worry about that hook. No offense to Wilder, you only have to worry about the right hand. Right? You give, like, if you're a one-dimensional fighter like that, like Fury's going to eat you alive, right? Usyk's not a one-dimensional fighter. I do think the size eventually plays dividends for Fury, and he beats Usyk because of his size. He uses his size, and I think he'll tire him out and take it late. But I still give Fury about a 45% chance because I'm sorry, I give Usyk about a 45% chance.
Because you have that much respect for
Because Usyk. I have respect for what Usyk does, and I think Fury's going to be getting hit with punches that he's not going to see coming, and I think that catches Fury by surprise. He hates it.
So let's do this, and I'll ask this of the chat as well. Let's say Joshua wins the rematch with Usyk. And let's say even if there's a trilogy, let's pretend there's a trilogy, and he defeats Usyk again. And the boxing gods shine upon us. In late 2023, we get Joshua versus Fury. For all the marbles, one of the biggest fights that can be made in boxing, if not the biggest globally that can be made in boxing. The heavyweight championship between two of the biggest stars in boxing. What do you give Joshua's chances of becoming undisputed and beating Tyson Fury? The chat as well.
That's about. First of all, I think a draw is very plausible in that fight. I would say as high as like 10% for a draw. That high, I think it's very, very possible. And then I would give about 38% Fury, 10% draw, 42% AJ.
Wow.
And I'll tell you why, because styles make fights. I've been saying this for a while. I've always believed this. I've always believed that, and I've been saying this for the last 2 years or so. Ever since he defeated Fury, that is Wilder in the rematch, I've always said Wilder's not going to beat Fury, right? But I believe AJ beats Fury, and I believe Wilder beats AJ, right? And I have reasons for that, but just to stick to this fight. AJ could crack with both hands. Like, he can crack, okay? And he has the size to match. He's a big, strong dude. And he's got a really good right hand, which we know Fury can get hit with, but he also has a hook. He has an uppercut. Fury likes to duck low a lot, and that uppercut would be money. Okay? Now, and I also don't think that the big Fury would have to be back to his like Klitschko weight for me to favor him against AJ. He would have to be back in the at least like 261, 258, somewhere around there. I don't think he'll have the stamina in that fight. I think he'll exert too much energy, and I think Joshua's a strong, heavyweight. He might be stronger than Fury, even though Fury's big or whatever. I think Joshua's actually stronger. There's no way to know that, but I do believe that. Joshua lifts weights and stuff, which people say that's like a wrong thing to do, but I don't agree. I think for a guy like Fury, that's what you want to do. And I think he'll be able to hold his own with Fury trying to manhandle him. And I just don't see that hook not landing, that uppercut not landing when he ducks low, or the right hand. And I don't think he could take all those punches from AJ. I just don't. I think AJ, I would slightly favor him in a fight with Fury. Fury's on his back foot in that fight, brother. Period.
Before I go to the super chat by Nando real quick, I would say I'd have it. I agree with you that the draw would be higher percentage in this fight because it's going to decision. It's going to decision, in my opinion. So I would say 65% to Fury, 30% to Joshua, and I'd still go 5% draw. And the reason being, I understand what you're saying about Joshua. The bigger guy who is there to be hit would not give Joshua the problems that the smaller fighters with higher output have given him. Andy Ruiz, shorter fighter, was able to use his, as weird as it sounds, more compact body to throw those overhands and land on Joshua. And it did well for him. Usyk, lower to the ground, more compact fighter, was
Different
able to use
fighters,
was able to use that against Joshua as well. And maybe Fury wouldn't be able to do that. He's a bigger body there to get hit. Joshua would be able to take advantage of that. So yeah, maybe it would be a more competitive fight than Joshua versus Usyk one was. I just think Fury's Fury. And I just envision every scenario in which Fury comes out on top at the end of the day.
What happens? Let me ask you this. Like, just play a simulation in your head of that fight.
Mm-hmm.
You think he's going to bum rush or try to bum rush AJ the way he did Wilder in that second fight?
No.
I don't think he's going to do that, because then he's going to be because AJ has those mid-range missiles. You know what I mean? He's got that hook, and he's got something like if Fury ducks low, boom, he's got that uppercut. And he's got the right hand when he's backing up too, or when he's coming at him. So, AJ has his jab, no doubt. I mean, and Fury, that is, he's got an excellent jab, but I think AJ is a much harder puncher, and I just see him hurting Fury. I just do.
Yeah,
I know I'm in the minority. I know I am, but I've always felt that way about those two.
Will the WBA even exist next year? They're wearing out the fax machine with a wave of Mandos all of a sudden. Now, the WBA today, I don't know if you saw this, they said that Leo Santa Cruz has 24 hours to decide if he's going to fight Lee Wood, defend against Lee Wood. If not, he's got to drop the belt. He's going to go fight.
You're already giving him 3 years, so what's another 24 hours? Jesus Christ.
3.5. So I'm hearing they were pressured into this. I'm hearing that people were going to show some receipts and stuff like that. I don't know how true that is, but they're finally coming around and saying, Leo Santa Cruz, look, you got to defend this belt or else. They're doing the same thing with Gennady Golovkin. They're saying after Golovkin fights Canelo September 17th, he has 120 days to defend his belt at 160 against Lara. And if not, then he's got to vacate his belt and move up to 168 and stay there, or just stay titleless at 160. But the reason I like that move is it's time for something to shake at 160. Middleweight is just the dumpster juicest of dumpster juice divisions right now. It's frustrating to watch because we've got champions not fighting. We've got Charlo not fighting, Boo Boo Andre not fighting. We don't know if they're going to campaign at 160, 168. Golovkin's moving up to 168. We've got guys at 154 talking about going down to 147 and not up to 160. Whereas in the past, we had guys like Sergio Martinez, Miguel Cotto, Canelo move up from 154 and graduate up to 160. even when they weren't natural middleweights like a Cotto or a Martinez. So guys gravitated towards middleweight. Now guys are gravitating away from it. Fundora, 154, Charlo. They're not talking about moving up to 160. They're staying at 154 to fight at 154. So something's got to shake at middleweight. In order for boxing to be like truly living up to its potential, the sexy divisions have to be sexy. And the sexy divisions just aren't sexy right now. You know, hopefully we get Spence versus Crawford and welterweight becomes a bit more sexy, but the traditional divisions, lightweight, welterweight, middleweight, they've got to be sexy, especially in America where between 130 and 160, most of the titles are owned by American fighters. That's where most of the eyeballs are. So these divisions have to be sexy, but the middleweight division is the opposite of sexy. If it was a girl, she'd be like a 2 right now. It's awful.
Yeah.
It's awful. What do you make of the middleweight division? Is somebody going to take this thing over at middleweight? You know what it is too? Guys, Canelo's up at 168. So these guys want to be up by Canelo. They want to be by the homecoming queen. Instead of in the sexy division of the middleweight division. If Canelo was at middleweight, the division would be sexy, right? Because everybody would be gravitating towards 160. Canelo would be the champion. And in order for a division to be great, like not in all cases, but a great division to me is when you have an alpha dog, you have an alpha, and everybody's going after that alpha. And then like 2 through 10 or 2 through 7, whatever it may be,
I mean,
you have guys trying to separate themselves from each other in order to try to pick off that alpha. And we don't have that at middleweight. We don't have an alpha. We don't have anybody trying to be the alpha dog or trying to separate themselves in order to be the alpha dog.
Look, the middleweight division, now I haven't looked this up in years, so if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I believe is like, bro, that division was like in the 1840s or something crazy like that. That's how old the middleweight division is. It's like the first, I believe anyway. I could be wrong about this, but I do believe it's the first established like division, like what a definition of a division. Because heavyweight really isn't. It doesn't have a weight limit, but like, you know, when they made a weight limit, like it was with middleweight. It's a historic division. They used to say like the only thing, you know, yes, the greatest prize in boxing is the heavyweight championship of the world, but right after that, it's a middleweight division, a middleweight champion of the world. I mean, it is and then obviously it's part of the original 8 weight classes. It's a historic division. So much history. And right now, when boxing is hot and is doing great, it's had a great year, middleweight just isn't in the mix. Like, it's not, I don't know what the hell's going on, but like, you know, I get that Canelo moved up and I get that now Gennady Golovkin's moving up, so it's whatever, but all these guys need to do is start fighting each other. That's all they need to do. Start actually getting in the ring and fighting is what they need to do. Okay? And that means that these if Jamal needs, I just think he needs to step up. Sulecki isn't doing it for me. Sorry. At the age, the dude's like a couple months older than Canelo, and he's like fighting Sulecki. Like that's what are we doing? You know, so middleweight, I don't even know what to say about it. I mean, it's in the dumpster right now with fire.
It's in the dumpster with fire. When was the last time it was great, like truly great? Like Hopkins had his run, and then Jermaine Taylor comes and knocks him off.
Bro, middleweight was like there used to be milestones that fighters went for. You know what I mean? So like for example, Duran was a lightweight champion of the world, right? He skipped 140. He went straight to like, because welterweight was a milestone. 140 was a new division. There wasn't a lot of money in it. It probably had a lot to do with that, but also legacy-wise, it was the milestones, right? And I think those milestones historically have been, not always, but in some cases, the original 8. Trinidad, he was a welterweight champion. 154, as crazy as it sounds, that was almost like a pit stop to him. You know what I mean? He fought some great fighters, like from Vargas, Reed, you name it. But then he moved up, destroyed Joppy. I mean, just annihilated him, who was like a top 5 middleweight easy, probably top 3. He just annihilated him. De La Hoya, he tried to go for the middleweight crown. I mean, it was always, the middleweight was always like a pinnacle, like a next level type thing, right? Right now, it isn't. It just isn't right now. It's just not it. I thought middleweight, going by your definition,
because we could say,
going by your, real quick, going by your definition, I mean, the alpha dog for a while was Sergio Martinez. So there was somebody people could gun for. And Martinez was like good enough to beat the big dudes. He was small enough for guys in lower weight classes to move up. Like Sipik, was it, that moved up to fight him? Right? He was small enough for people to talk about maybe Mayweather moving up to fight him and stuff like that. Cotto moving up to fight him or whatever. Like he was small enough for that. So I think it was a good run when it was in good hands with Martinez. I think when Golovkin and Canelo were fighting for the crown, I thought it was hot. Jacobs was in the mix too. People forget about that. He was right in the mix. All those guys fought each other, by the way, at middleweight. I mean, that was a good run. But to me, like I think Pavlik held it down for a little bit, but so did Jermaine. But that was the last great middleweight fight, in my opinion, though.
I was going to ask you that. Do you think the last great? I consider Golovkin versus Canelo too a great middleweight fight, though.
It's a good fight, yeah.
But you don't think it was a great fight?
Oh, I do. But is it like, did I get the same kind of like wolf? Like people forget how good Jermaine Taylor Pavlik was, and people forget the lead up to that fight. You know what I
mean? And let me paint that picture real quick. Is Jermaine Taylor was a 3.5-year veteran. Like we're talking about fighters 6 years in, 10 years in who haven't stepped up yet. Jermaine Taylor was a pro for 3.5 years and fought Bernard Hopkins for Undisputed championship at the middleweight division. You talk about sexy. That's as sexy as it gets, becoming Undisputed middleweight champion of the world. The only thing bigger than that would be Undisputed heavyweight.
Jermaine Taylor was on people's like top 5, top 3 pound for pound list.
Yeah. Okay. And he comes in and he defeats Bernard Hopkins. Now, scorecards could have went either way. Then he defeats him the same way in a rematch. Scorecards could have went either way, but he won both of those fights. Then he goes in and fights Kelly. You got to remember, they were trying to make Jermaine Taylor versus Edison Miranda.
Yeah.
And then Kelly Pavlik upsets Edison Miranda by knockout. And then Kelly Pavlik was sort of looked past, right? There was the countdown leading up to the fight. And then Kelly Pavlik comes in and knocks Jermaine Taylor out. And what you said, I mean, this could be considered the best
fight to me, bro.
Fight of the 21st century.
Look, first of all, I missed those countdowns. It was simple. 30-minute show. That's it. Okay, like just tell me about the fight. Tell me why I should give a fuck, and that's it. You know what I mean? And then, first of all, it's people can Monday morning quarterback it all they want, but if there was YouTube back then, like a community like we have right now, Jermaine Taylor would be being hyped up. Jermaine Taylor, middleweight champion, he gets disrespected. Blah, blah, blah. That's what people would be saying. Okay, Pavlik was a big, strong, big puncher, good jab. Wasn't that fast, which is why a lot of people didn't think he could beat Jermaine. But the fight itself, man, like the way like he knocked down Pavlik and it looked like it was going to be an easy night. People forget about that. Like he was just battering him up. It looked like I was like, oh, fuck, he's going to fuck him up. Pavlik gets back up, survives that round. And dude, like the way he was pressuring Jermaine Taylor. And when they stopped that fight, I mean, like the chest was convulsing or whatever. Like it was one of the craziest, most brutal stoppages like I've ever seen. And Jermaine was never the same after that, ever. I mean, he had glimpses of it against Pavlik, and then unfortunately for him, he was stopped in the 12th. You know what I mean? But I think he always had ghosts of that Pavlik fight. He was never the same after that fight.
No, it seemed like that took everything out of him, and
it was violent. It was a more violent fight than Canelo Golovkin, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, and fights are greater, and sometimes guys with great chins is a detriment to them. It's not fair to them, and I've had this discussion with people. Can you have a great fight without a fighter getting hurt? And Golovkin versus Canelo, nobody was ever truly hurt. In this fight, you had Kelly Pavlik should have been out of there in the second round. He somehow survives and then destroys Jermaine Taylor in the 7th round. It's just a great fight. Could have went either way. Both fighters seriously hurt, and it was a truly, truly great fight.
Amazing fight. I won a lot of money in that fight too.
Yeah, and it leads me to this question: Who, real quick, who do you think could be? Has this guy shown his face yet? The next big middleweight, a guy who can hold on to, consolidate belts, actively defend them, and become a middleweight that can be on pound for pound lists for 3, 4, 5 years. Do you see that guy out there? Could it be Janabek?
It could be.
Could it be a guy moving up from 154 to 160? Is that guy out there?
I don't know that guy. I mean, first, I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like Jermaine Taylor and Pavlik were like big middleweights. Like I'm not talking big like famous. I'm talking like big. Like they were big dudes. You know what I mean? Like we haven't really, like Golovkin isn't that big of a dude. Like Canelo obviously isn't that big of a dude. Cotto wasn't. Like so I always found that interesting. Like we haven't really had.
Where's that natural middleweight?
Yeah, that natural middleweight. Like I don't see it, bro. Like not right now.
You don't think Janabek?
I mean, Janabek could, but again, I mean, look, I don't. Let's see Janabek do a little more. Like I stay consistent about that. Let's see him do a little more. But he looks the part. But I don't just crown him. You know what I mean? Like let's see him step up a little bit. So, but he could be.
Yeah, I mean, Golovkin's the closest we've had to it because I just feel like Sergio Martinez, Miguel Cotto.
I thought Martinez was a good middleweight champion, but it always felt like
he was
ahead of the pack, but
right?
I would question the pack. You know what I mean? Like, how good was the pack? And
he was a 154 pounder to me, like a great 154.
Yeah, like he was a product of the middleweight division. Just wasn't all that a 154 pound dude took over the division. Like, I mean, that's what it kind of reminded me of, kind of.
Yeah. So I'll ask you this question before we wrap it up, but Deontay Wilder, there's rumors of him coming back. What do you think he adds to the division? And can a 36-year-old guy who Tyson Fury's his only loss? Lost to him, right? I thought he lost to him 3 times, but can that guy make a resurrection at 36 years old? Let's pretend his head is right. Let's pretend he's serious about a comeback. He gets his comeback fight, and then after that, let's pretend everything plays out how the odds say they're going to play out. Usyk beats Joshua. So the picture becomes Joshua's coming off of a loss. Let's say Wilder wins a tune-up fight coming back later on in the year. Early 2023, where would you like to see Deontay Wilder? Who would you like to see him fight? And can he make a resurrection in his career at 36 years old?
So, assuming his head is right and everything, this is going to sound crazy to people, but I don't think a fighter like Wilder, like, I don't think there's a requirement for him to have his head right or like none of that. I think a fighter like Deontay Wilder, who wears for better or for worse, he wears his heart on his sleeve. He fights with his heart. That's how Wilder fights. He fights with his heart. That's how he fights. For better, for worse, like him, don't like him. I just feel like it doesn't even matter what the state of his life is. When that bell rings, like I do believe he goes from Wilder to the Bronze Bomber, and he just kind of just fights, right? And I think that fighter is dangerous against anybody. I think he's always going to be in a fight, even when he's losing. He's always in a fight. So yes, I think he could definitely get back in the mix, especially if Fury quote unquote retires and the belts, the WBC belts out there. Fights I would like to see him in. I heard about him fighting Robert Helenius. I think that's a good fight, actually.
That's going to be the next one I heard.
I got no complaint about that if he wants to fight him. If Sumi Ruiz beats Ortiz, I think that should be the next fight. That's the biggest fight PBC can make with two heavyweights. Yeah. Wilder versus Andy Ruiz, two former heavyweight champions of the world. We could have had that for Undisputed if everything played out right, but it didn't. So why not? That's a fight they can make. Let's do it.
We're assuming Ruiz is going to get past Ortiz, which is a good assumption to make, right? He should get past Ortiz.
Yeah, it would do a betting favorite. Yeah, he's a betting favorite. I have 70% Ruiz, maybe a 2% possibility of a draw, and the rest for Ortiz. I'm not too concerned.
Yeah. So would you rather? I'd rather see Wilder versus Joshua. That's still, to me, one of the most 100% fights. But 100%. I would definitely take Wilder versus Ortiz. Wilder versus Ruiz, and I would pick Wilder to win that fight as well. Yeah, I just think there's too much size. I think he would lay Ruiz out.
Yeah, I mean, the Ruiz fight would be interesting, and I'll save that if it happens. But I agree that I think Ruiz could take a couple of those rights. But I think he get on the inside and do damage to the body, and he has quick hands, and so we'll see. We'll see if that fight happens. But assuming Wilder could get past that, which he could, and I saw somebody say, "Look, I don't think Helenius is anything for him." Look, he's coming off 2 brutal losses. He's been inactive. I don't have a problem with a Robert Helenius fight. But let's say he gets past that, which he should. If he doesn't, it's a wrap, right? If he can't beat Helenius, it's over. But I think he beats him. I would still, despite what I said, I would favor him versus Ruiz, depending on how he looks against Helenius. We'll see. And how Ruiz looks against Ortiz, I could change my mind, right? But okay, because I'm all about data, But I agree with you. AJ versus Wilder is one of the biggest fights that could be made in boxing. That is a bad blood fight. And bad blood fights, as we saw with De La Hoya, Vargas, and we've seen it multiple times. Bad blood sells. It just does. Okay, like the two jocks in the yard aren't getting along and they want to fight. People tune in. It's just the way it is. So there's bad blood there, bro. There's a lot of history. They can make that fight.
And here's how I would like the Deontay Wilder to come back to play out. And this aligns both as a boxing fan and, say, Wilder's manager. This is how I would play it as his manager as well. I'd like to see Helenius. I'd like to see the Ruiz fight, as you pointed out, in America. You can put that in Vegas. You can put that in LA. You can put that anywhere. It's a big fight. It's a big pay-per-view fight between two of the biggest American heavyweight stars in boxing, if not the two biggest, right? And then you do, if he beats
real quick, it makes me wish the NBA, was still like a big belt, like it used to be back in the day. The North American Championship, because they could have done it for that, but it's whatever now.
So let's say he does that, beats Ruiz, then you do Wilder versus Joshua in a big event in the UK. And I think Wilder should go over there and fight that fight because it would be a humongous fight.
Huge.
In a soccer stadium. And it aligns for boxing fans as well because he just gave me 3 classic fights against Tyson Fury. Those were 3 great heavyweight fights. 3 great heavyweight
2 were classics. One was just a beatdown.
Yeah, the second one not so much, right? The first and the third. But at least he laid himself out in that second.
Yeah, for sure. He showed a lot of heart, no doubt.
So I can be a little forgiving and say, yes, the Helenius fight, let's give him that one. Let's see where he's at. I can be a bit forgiving as a boxing fan if he wants to go with that one instead of straight to whatever he wants to go to next, because he was also calling out the winner of Joshua versus Usyk. But you already have, from what I hear, an agreement with Helenius for the next fight. So anyway, I'd like to see Deontay Wilder back. We would all agree that Deontay Wilder livens up the heavyweight division. The heavyweight division is better with Wilder in it. He just adds excitement. And you're always one punch away, right? That's one of the biggest weapons in boxing is his right hand.
That
Any
right
final
hand
thoughts?
is one of the most devastating punches in the history of boxing. You don't need to love Wilder. You don't need to like him. You don't none of that. But you should respect that right hand.
Yep. Any final thoughts? Appreciate you with some heavyweight boxing tonight. Any final thoughts? Where are we going to be Thursday night with the round table?
Look, Thursday night, man, round table will have Ring IQ on, so it's going to be interesting. It'll be on my channel, The Style Boxing. If you're not already subscribe. Also, look for us on Tuesdays and Wednesdays.
Tomorrow we'll
Just
be back.
hit that bell button so you're notified. If you didn't know, well, now you know. Like, oh, I didn't know that. Well, now you know, right? So right now, just hit that bell button, hit the all. But we'll be here and a lot to cover, man. The sport of boxing, even when there's no big fights. You know what I mean?
Yep. A lot to cover, and we'll be back earlier tomorrow. Should be back earlier tomorrow. So hit those alerts. Always hit those alerts. Appreciate you, D-Style. Keep it boxing. God bless.
Peace.
We out. Peace.